Ukraine is warning citizens in the eastern part of the country to flee as Russia shifts its attention there. President Zelenskyy is calling for more weapons aid from its allies as Russian troops are regrouping. CBS News' Natalie Brand has the latest.
U.S. officials say Russia has appointed a new general, Alexander Dvornikov, to lead the war in Ukraine. That same general was in charge in Syria, where Russia is accused of war crimes.
Those same brutal tactics, that same disregard for civilian life and civilian infrastructure will probably continue as they now focus in a more geographically confined area in the Donbass.
Russia is reinforcing its troops in eastern Ukraine with satellite images showing an 8-mile-long convoy believed to be headed to the Donbass region. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy expressed concern about the battle in the Donbass and Mariupol with CBS's Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes.
What are you expecting now in the east and in the south?
We think this will be a new wave of this war. We don't know how much Russian weaponry there will be, but we understand there'll be many times more than there is now.
Mariupol's mayor tells the Associated Press more than 10,000 civilians have been killed as the fight rages on. President Biden and India's Prime Minister discussed the atrocities in Ukraine during a virtual meeting on Monday. The administration is trying to urge India not to increase its imports of Russian energy.
The United States and India are going to continue our close consultation on how to manage the destabilizing effects of this Russian war.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi says he's spoken several times with Presidents Putin and Zelenskyy and has appealed for peace and direct talks between the two. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
CBS News foreign correspondent Holly Williams joins me now from Kyrvyi Rih, Ukraine. Holly, we've been hearing for a few days now about the Russian military regrouping and refocusing on eastern Ukraine. What are you seeing to support that? What evidence is there?
Well, Scott, Russian forces lost the Battle of Kyiv. They ran into much tougher resistance from the Ukrainians than many people expected. And along with a catalogue of horrors that the Russians left in towns and villages that they occupied, they also had a catalogue of military failures. They've now withdrawn across the border in that northern area where we assume that they're regrouping. Russia has said that it is switching its focus to eastern Ukraine, and they have appointed a new general to be in charge, according to a U.S. official, General Alexander Dvornikov, who previously led Russia's military intervention in Syria. Now, what are Russia's new objectives? Well, many people are speculating that they may now be more limited after that defeat around Kyiv. We assume that they're very much focused on the Donbass region, where Russian-backed separatists already control territory and have been fighting a war against Ukrainian forces since 2014. And there's also speculation that ultimately what Russia is trying to do is connect those regions, perhaps an expanded version of those regions, with Crimea, which Russia seized control of, annexed back in 2014. In the last few days, we've seen satellite images that appear to show a column more than 8 miles long of Russian military vehicles heading to that front line in eastern Ukraine. Military experts say that the tactics that the Ukrainians use so effectively around Kyiv, in those densely populated areas, in many cases guerrilla tactics, will not be as effective in the east, in regions that are much less densely populated.
No matter where the Russians are focused, President Zelenskyy has been pretty consistent about what he needs, Holly. He needs more weapons to hold off these Russian forces. What can you tell us about what the Ukrainian forces have right now, what they need, and perhaps most importantly, what they're getting?
Well, Scott, the weapons that we've seen the Ukrainians use incredibly effectively throughout this conflict are anti-tank weapons, including the javelins that they've been given by the U.S. and some of its allies. A U.S. defense official said today that America has given 10,000 anti-armor weapons to the Ukrainians, and half of those since the invasion began. The Ukrainians say that they've destroyed around 2,500 tanks and armoured personnel carriers. Now, we can't verify those numbers, but I can tell you that as we've driven around this country, we have seen the burnt out carcasses of tanks and armoured personnel carriers everywhere. What the Ukrainians say they really want, though, are the weapons that they can use to protect their skies, fighter jets and modern air defence systems. And we're hearing that from everyone from President Zelenskyy all the way down to the rank and file in the military. We actually spoke with a colonel in the Ukrainian military, a retired colonel who's now come back to service because of the invasion. And he said, you know, the West has given us enough weapons to prevent our destruction, but they haven't given us the weapons we need to win this war.
We saw those images, Holly, of British Prime Minister Boris Johnson walking the streets of Kyiv with President Zelenskyy over the weekend. What's the significance of that image and that meeting in that location?
Well, Boris Johnson is just, you know, the latest in a long line of world leaders who've made the trip to Kyiv to meet President Zelenskyy. And obviously, it's a very symbolic show of support, and it's a courageous thing to do, to come into a country that's at war. But I was incredibly struck by those images, those videos of Boris Johnson, because he was walking through the center of Kyiv with President Zelenskyy. I mean, through streets that I recognize, and talking to locals on the streets. And that tells you something very profound about how much the security situation has improved in Kyiv in recent days. Remember that President Zelenskyy, we assume, has spent most of the last few weeks inside a bunker.
Yeah, it really is an important statement, a symbol, that walk. In Kyrvyi Rih, Ukraine, Holly Williams, thanks for your time.